realized I was forgetting my stories. So I began writing them down then. And at that point, my main character was a magic horse who lived on an island of horses where nobody rode them.
Do you get along better with people now?
I can fake it. That is literally true. I know how now, and I can do it for periods of time, and then I have to go back home and hide for a while.
Butler's latest novel, Parable of the Sower, focuses on a young woman who uses her wits to survive in a near-future world as it crumbles around her. But the leadership qualities she's bestowed upon her main character are not a reflection of the author herself.
One of the things I like to do with my writing is explore things that are alien to me. And I'm not a leader. I'm a very solitary person.
So 30 years from now, we're going to be in desperate straits.
Well, I think of the 60s as the decade of attempting to come together. 90s is the decade of disintegration, I'm sad to say. And the 2020s is the decade of real, I call it the burn. Food prices have skyrocketed, sea level the sea level is rising, the greenhouse effect is in full swing. This does not mean that it's the end of the world or even the end of the US. Things are just a lot worse.
But we are very adaptable as humans.
I don't know how we're going to end up. Well, the odd thing about my books is, even though there is a lot of pessimism and bad feeling, there is always hope at the end. And it's not tacked on. It's something that goes on these things, even when I don't want it to.
Why do you suppose there aren't more black female science fiction writers?
Probably because they're not normal. People do what they see other people doing. And if you look around and you don't see very many people who look like you doing something, you worry that maybe there's a good reason for that, and you go do something else. I don't have any sense. I didn't do that. I looked around and saw that they weren't doing what I wanted to do, and it didn't matter. I still wanted to do it.
Does it give you any sense of satisfaction to be a role model? Other women who want to be science fiction writers?
I don't recall ever having wanted desperately to be a black woman science fiction writer. And my attitude was, I am a black woman. And I think it doesn't come out in the stories. I can't imagine why. It's there. So, it's not something I'm focusing on. It's just there. It's part of it. It's me.
Would you say that you're an upbeat person?
Most of my friends and acquaintances would say no. I probably am. The world is so terrible that if you're really downbeat, you would almost want to kill yourself. And I don't.
Southern California fantasy in the parks, just a couple of commercials away. Summer is a time to seek out some serious good times, and amusement parks are pros at providing the ultimate fun fix. On this week's Buzz Best Bets, we'll fill you in on high-tech attractions that have just opened at 2 Southern California theme parks.
I remember being near a fire like this one. I was sitting in the lap of my grandmother.
Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California, has unveiled a project that took more than 3 years to complete. It's a multi-century journey into Native America called Mystery Lodge. And with the help of some riveting effects, audiences are captivated by an old storyteller whose tales magically unfold in a nearby fire. Universal Studios Hollywood recently unveiled their new attractions with much fanfare at a star-studded 30th anniversary celebration. And those in search of summer spectacles will have to look mighty hard to find something that rivals Hollywood Nights. The park unveiled 2 visual stunners to kick off their new nighttime program. The first, Cinemastique, Illusions of the Night, showcases a spellbinding performance by the Pendragons, world-famous illusionists who also happen to be married. And then there's Spectra Blast.
Spectra Blast is a huge special effects pyrotechnic laser fountain extravaganza.
The Hollywood Nights Party, which promises to be a perennial summer affair at Universal Studios Hollywood, boogies on through Labor Day weekend. Those are this week's Buzz Best Bets. Thanks, lovely. Nice job, kids. Would be
Good
nice.
job.
Yeah, it was a good show, wasn't it? As a matter of fact, before we go, I want to tell you about this buzz that just came in here. There's a new Godzilla movie going to be made. And in this version, that's still in the planning, Tokyo is spared. Well, you see, it's an American version, so what they're going to do? Godzilla's going to trash San Francisco and New York. What a staff. Well, we'll see you next week.
Go inside Wake Shield, the Big Bang Challenge, and the robotic explorer Galileo on Inside Space tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. Now stay tuned for mysteries from beyond the other dominion. Next.
Who built the first head-mounted display in 1966. There's some great
Environments. They've come up with virtual reality hang gliding, and convention callers were eager to give it a go. Octavia Butler is often hailed as the first celebrated black female science fiction writer. Her stories, many of which explore multiracial future societies, have received science fiction's highest honors, from Hugo to Nebula. To spend time with Octavia Butler is to truly understand how a person's past can shape their future. So what kind of a child were you like?
I'm an only child, and I had no idea how to get along with other children. And also, I was a strange kid who'd learned to stay by herself and make things up.
Do you remember when you first started writing your stories down?
When I was 10, I realized that I knew the name of a character, but I couldn't think who that character was. And I realized I was forgetting my stories. So I began writing them down then. And at that point, my main character was a magic horse who lived on an island of horses where nobody rode them.
Do you get along better with people now?
I can fake it. That is literally true. I know how now. And I can do it for periods of time, and then I have to go back home and hide for a while.
Butler's latest novel, Parable of the Sower, focuses on a young woman who uses her wits to survive in a near-future world as it crumbles around her. But the leadership qualities she's bestowed upon her main character are not a reflection of the author herself.
One of the things I like to do with my writing is explore things that are alien to me. And I'm not a leader. I'm a very solitary person.
So 30 years from now, we're going to be in desperate straits.
Well, I think of the 60s as the decade of attempting to come together. 90s is the decade of disintegration, sad to say. And the 2020s is the decade of real, I call it the burn. Food prices have skyrocketed, sea level the sea level is rising, the greenhouse effect is in full swing. This does not mean that it's the end of the world or even the end of the US. Things are just a lot worse.
But we are very adaptable as humans.
I don't know how we're going to end up. Well, the odd thing about my books is, even though there is a lot of pessimism and bad feeling, there is always hope at the end. And it's not tacked on. It's something that grows out of the story, even when I don't want it to.
Why do you suppose there aren't more black female science fiction writers?
Probably because there aren't more. People do what they see other people doing.
Oh.
And if you look around and you don't see very many people who look like you doing something, you worry that maybe there's a good reason for that, and you go do something else. I don't have any sense. I didn't do that. I looked around and saw that there weren't very many people doing what I wanted to do, and it didn't matter. I still wanted to do it.
Does it give you any sense of satisfaction that you can be a role model to other women who want to be science fiction writers?
I don't recall ever having wanted desperately to be a black woman science fiction writer. I wanted to be a writer. And my attitude was, I am a black woman. And if it doesn't come out in the stories, I can't imagine why. It's there. So, it's not something I'm focusing on. It's just there. It's part of it. It's me.
Would you say that you're an upbeat person?
Most of my friends and acquaintances would say no. I probably am. The world is so terrible, but if you're really downbeat, you would almost want to kill yourself. And I don't.
Southern California fantasy in the parks, just a couple of commercials away. Summer is a time to seek out some serious good time. Octavia Butler is often hailed as the first celebrated black female science fiction writer. Her stories, many of which explore multiracial future societies, have received science fiction's highest honors, from Hugo to Nebula. To spend time with Octavia Butler is to truly understand how a person's past can shape their future. So what kind of a child are you?
I'm an only child, and I had no idea how to get along with other children. And also, I was a strange kid who'd learned to stay by herself and make things up.
Do you remember when you first started writing your stories down?
When I was 10, I realized that I knew the name of a character, but I couldn't think who that character was. And I realized I was forgetting my stories. So I began writing them down then. And at that point, my main character was a magic horse who lived on an island of horses where nobody rode them.
Do you get along better with people now?
I can fake it.
I see.
That is literally true. I know how now, and I can do it for periods of time, and then I have to go back home and hide for a while.
Butler's latest novel, Parable of the Sower, focuses on a young woman who uses her wits to survive in a near-future world as it troubles around her. But the leadership qualities she's bestowed upon her main character are not a reflection of the author herself.
One of the things I like to do with my writing is explore things that are alien to me. And I'm not a leader. I'm a very solitary person.
So 30 years from now, we're going to be in desperate straits.
Well, I think of the 60s as the decade of attempting to come together. 90s is the decade of disintegration, I'm sad to say. And the 2020s is the decade of real, I call it the burn. Food prices have skyrocketed, sea level the sea level is rising, the greenhouse effect is in full swing. This does not mean that it's the end of the world or even the end of the US. Things are just a lot worse.
But we are very adaptable as humans.
I don't know how we're going to end up. Well, the odd thing about my books is, even though there is a lot of pessimism and bad feeling, there is always hope at the end. And it's not tacked on. It's something that grows out of the story, even when I don't want it to.
Why do you suppose there aren't more black female science fiction writers?
Probably because there aren't more. People do what they see other people doing. And if you look around and you don't see very many people who look like you doing something, you worry that maybe there's a good reason for that, and you go and do something else. I don't have any sense. I didn't do that. I looked around and saw that there weren't very many people doing what I wanted to do, and it didn't matter. I still wanted to do it.
Does it give you any sense of satisfaction that you can be a role model to other women who want to be science fiction writers?
I don't recall ever having wanted desperately to be a black woman science fiction writer. I wanted to be a writer. And my attitude was, I am a black woman. And if it doesn't come out in the stories, I can't imagine why. It's there. So, it's not something I'm focusing on. It's just there. It's part of, it's me.
Would you say that you're an upbeat person?
Most of my friends and acquaintances would say no. I probably am. The world is so terrible, but if you're really downbeat, you would almost want to kill yourself. And I don't.
Southern California fantasy in the parks, just a couple of commercials away. Summer is a time to seek out some serious good times, and amusement parks are pros at providing the ultimate fun fix. On this week's Buzz Best Bets, we'll fill you in on high-tech attractions that have just opened at 2 Southern California theme parks.
I remember being near a fire like this one. I
Octavia Butler is often hailed as the first celebrated black female science fiction writer. Her stories, many of which explore multiracial future societies, have received science fiction's highest honors, from Hugo to Nebula. To spend time with Octavia Butler is to truly understand how a person's past can shape their future.
So what kind of a child were you like?
I'm an only child, and I had no idea how to get along with other children. And also, I was a strange kid who'd learned to stay by herself and make things up.
Do you remember when you first started writing your stories down?
When I was 10, I realized that I knew the name of a character, but I couldn't think who that character was. And I realized I was forgetting my stories. So I began writing them down then. And at that point, my main character was a magic horse who lived on an island of horses where nobody rode them.
Do you get along better with people now?
I can fake it. That is literally true. I know how now, and I can do it for periods of time, and then I have to go back home and hide for a while.
Butler's latest novel, Parable of the Sower, focuses on a young woman who uses her wits to survive in a near-future world as it crumbles around her. But the leadership qualities she's bestowed upon her main character are not a reflection of the author herself.
One of the things I like to do with my writing is explore things that are alien to me. And I'm not a leader. I'm a very solitary person.
So 30 years from now, we're going to be in desperate straits.
Well, I think of the 60s as the decade of attempting to come together. 90s is the decade of disintegration, sad to say. And the 2020s is the decade of real, I call it the burn. Food prices have skyrocketed, sea level rise the sea level is rising, the greenhouse effect is in full swing. This does not mean that it's the end of the world or even the end of the US. Things are just a lot worse.
But we are very adaptable as humans.
I don't know how we're going to end up. Well, the odd thing about my books is, even though there is a lot of pessimism and bad feeling, there is always hope at the end. And it's not tacked on. It's something that grows out of the story, even when I don't want it to.
Why do you suppose there aren't more black female science fiction writers?
Probably because there aren't more. People do what they see other people doing. And if you look around and you don't see very many people who look like you doing something, you worry that maybe there's a good reason for that, and you go and do something else. I don't have any sense. I didn't do that. I looked around and saw that there weren't very many people doing what I wanted to do, and it didn't matter. I still wanted to do it.
Does it give you any sense of satisfaction that you can be a role model to other women who want to be science fiction writers?
I don't recall ever having wanted desperately to be a black woman science fiction writer. I wanted to be a writer. And my attitude was, I am a black woman. And if it doesn't come out in the stories, I can't imagine why. It's there. So, it's not something I'm focusing on. It's just there. It's part of it. It's me.
Would you say that you're an upbeat person?
Most of my friends and acquaintances would say no. I probably am. The world is so terrible that if you're really down, you're almost going to kill yourself. And I don't.
Southern California fantasy in the parks, just a couple of commercials away.
Hello and welcome to another episode of TraegerMethod Oil Painting. This is episode 17, I believe. I have to double check that. We were just listening to Sounds of the Studio. Often when I paint, I listen to podcasts or I'll listen to typically YouTube videos, kind of half watch them. Lately I've been following threads, paying attention to names that come up in the mouths of speakers that I find interesting and compelling, illuminating. One of the names that has come up for me recently is Octavia Butler, the science fiction author. Her name has come up. And specifically, her Sowers, Parable of the Sower book. As I talked about in the last episode, I often will listen to a bunch of talks of an author and I'll skip the book. That's what I've done in the past. You know, an author puts out a book, they'll do a lot of speaking engagements to get on YouTube. So any book you want to read, you can just listen to the author talk about that book several times. And I said to myself, I kind of assumed that that was a good, efficient way to read the book, get the information in as quick and succinct a package as possible. Recently, I read the book by Roy Scranton that I talked about again last episode. The book Learning to Die in the Anthropocene. I actually bought it. I ordered it from Powell. I don't use Amazon. I ordered it from Powell's Books here in Portland. That and another book by Roy Scranton called We're Doomed, Now What? That is a collection of essays. I ordered those two books and I read Learning to Die in the Anthropocene cover to cover. And I gotta say, the experience was very, very important to me. For one, just the act of reading a book, not a computer screen, is very, very different. If you haven't done it in a long time, I highly recommend it. And it was the experience was so moving because, for two reasons. It wasn't just it was the act of reading the book, but it was also the book itself. It was like a perfect fit for what I've been going through. Now, if you mentally, spiritually, what I've been grappling with, heading into this election zone, whatever this is. If you listen to the last episode, you could hear I was struggling. I was coming from a pretty, a darkly, with some humor, but a very, I've been grappling with, our reality. Going to some very, kind of hopeless places. But I feel like that book has helped me work through it to a great deal, and it was very different than listening to speeches. It was very moving, and it illuminated a lot of questions that I've had. What am I trying to say? It very much spoke to all my concerns, to my big concerns, and left me in a hopeful place. Part of what Roy Scranton talks about is that he and his partner have a child, and knowing what he knows and having a picture of the future that's similar to my own, I'd imagine, somewhat in the same ballpark, he decided to have a child anyways. And part of the reason why he did that was because he said, I believe in life. I believe in sunsets. I believe in, the smell of a campfire. I believe in, coffee in the morning. The experience of life, the pleasure of life, the joy of life. And he said, her life might be very different than my own, but that's always been the case for humans. And you just do your best to prepare, to participate, to survive, and you rise to the occasion because life is good. It has good things in it that are worth living for and serving and all that, sustaining. And, you know, I mean, in my gut level, when I feel really hopeless and I feel like, yeah, just hopeless, I know that it's a defense mechanism. You know, it's a way of like giving myself an out, saying, well, there's no hope, so who cares? You don't have to get your act together. You don't have to motivate. You don't have to participate really fully, because what difference does it make? The cause is lost. So it's a lazy and kind of a, you know, immature, and that's also, you know, but on a gut level, it's also just not interesting. Like nobody is like excited by somebody who says, holy shit, there's no fucking point to anything. Like, why bother? You know, everything sucks. There's no point. Why bother? It's like, it's just not, it doesn't seem like the most interesting thing. And it seems immature. And, you know, part of like having kids too is like, it's a prayer for the future. It's saying like, let's make a future. It's all part of the cycle. And I think art making is in that same category for me. I don't have children. I'm not going to have children. But art making is the same thing. You know, why make art to send out into the world if it's all just going to be a pile of rubble and who cares? I said, well, for one thing, I'm compelled to do it. It's like the thing I do. So the solution I've come to is to combine the art making with activism. You know, raise money. I feel much better about marketing my work if I'm raising money for to help other people and to directly manifest a world that I want to live in, whether or not we succeed, to at least try. And I think the reason it's important to me to do that, one of the reasons it's important, is because it weaves together what I do naturally, you know, and what I'm compelled to do and what I believe in. I'll go where I'm most needed in life. I'll, put aside creative practice to, go to the front lines if I'm needed in a situation. But, I take into account who I am, the time of my life, my physical capabilities, my mental capabilities, what I'm talented at. And, I do think art making for me is a central practice. It's not peripheral. And if I can use this as a means of both spreading beauty and mystery and all that, and also very practical nuts and bolts participation in revolutionary activity, that seems to me to be the best solution for me in particular. Always subject to change, open to change, but that's the general strategy that I feel like is sustainable. So I've been thinking, of doing this clearinghouse kind of thing where I just get rid of all the art that has built up in my life, finish these paintings that I'm working on towards this show. Now, I don't know if there'd be a physical show, but it could be an online thing only. I mean, a lot of the work is a lot of my printmaking and drawings and things like that are going to be for sale online and studio visits here in Portland. But and who knows, maybe paintings will go the same way. Maybe I'll have, a very short show where people can, or they can make appointments somewhere. I don't know how the gallery thing works right now, but I'm thinking, just going, focusing at first on this web sales, and to that end, I put an item on my website, jasontraeger.com. I put one on there. It's for sale. 50% of the profits goes to the Oregon Justice Resource Center, local organization fighting for civil rights in this time of rising authoritarianism. I'm going to put a different thing up there. I'm going to try and do one every day for a while. Get a bunch of stuff on there. And I feel like if I do that, if I work diligently towards raising money, that's activism. That's participation. And I can feel good about devoting time to self-expression, which, on one level you can look at as like, oh, it's very decadent, self-expression. But I go, but it's also an essential human thing that I just happen to have devoted my life to and that I'm good at. So somewhat, There's a thing inside me that needs to be made. I'm going to make that thing. Let's make that work on as many levels as we can towards something positive. Something in alignment with my values. So that's, the solution I've come up with to the hopeless kind of orientation, the why bother, why would you have kids, that whole, this is kind of an episode that answers the last one. I put things like that last episode out there because I want to see, I'm allowing this conversation, this TraegerMethod oil painting conversation, whatever it is, this journal, to be to show those cycles. Because I don't know about anyone else, but that's how I would go. I tend to bust and then rebuild, bust, rebuild, and start again, lose interest in this, move on to that, try and correct, mistakes as I go and try to learn, do better. But it's a struggle, it's a battle, and if you struggle, you're not alone. You know that, but it's still good to hear it. So back to the beginning, I was talking about Octavia Butler and this practice of looking out for names that come up repeatedly in conversations or in podcasts that I like, in the mouths of people who I am interested in. When I hear a name several times, I'll check it out. I heard the name Hannah Arendt a lot when talking about fascism. I looked into her. I haven't read anything by her, but I've gone pretty deep into her. It was very illuminating, educating. Octavia Butler, from what I hear, I've come to believe that her Parable of the Sower is a book of fiction that I will read, that I should read. Because I thought, I enjoyed so much reading that Roy Scranton book, which is a very short, small book, a good one to dip if you're looking for a book to dip back into reading with. Learning to Die in the Anthropocene is a great choice. And I was thinking I might also read for pleasure fiction. And this Octavia Butler book looks like the one I'm going to do, so I'm going to order that from Powell's, buy that, support the economy, read a book. Also in keeping with my practice of Black Lives Matter activism, reading a Black female science fiction writer, hearing her perspective, her vision, her dream. Here in the painting, I'm doing very detailed brushwork. You can see using a liner brush. Really enjoy doing this goldish brown on goldish brown. And then putting in the little shadow that has a slightly transparent purple hue to it. The shadow is what makes these little strands really pop. When you put that shadow in, it's incredible what it does. Just suddenly makes it pop, it makes it look real. Looking forward to starting new paintings. That's part of what I've also seen that about, or what I've a realization that I've had is that I need to move work out of my studio, not just to, I mean, I need to do it. It satisfies every need I have to do that, to sell work and move it out. I mean, it might sound like the most obvious thing in the world, but you know, I've been a pretty hermetic artist for the most part in my life in terms of sharing my visions and things. I've kept them pretty, haven't been big on self-promotion. And sharing. But I'm feeling more and more like I need to, the work I feel like deserves it. And I need the money, of course, because I'd like to be able to afford to paint as a job, you know. And I want the work to live outside of my, you know, I want it to live out in the world. I want people to be able to enjoy it. And then the other element, the other very practical reason it's such a primary, it needs to be a priority, is that I need room, I need space. You know, I work in an apartment. I have a decent size amount of room, but I need to move this work out. My place is at capacity. These things need, you know, it's just a very organic need. Move room out to make room for more work. One thing I identified, I shouldn't forget to mention that I saw my therapist on Zoom. First time I've talked to my therapist since before COVID-19. So really, maybe since the beginning of the year. I don't know that I saw him after the holidays last year. So a long break, 8 months, 9 months, something in that neighborhood. And I decided I should revisit that. And it was very, very valuable. He's a great therapist, and he helped me out a lot. Why did I bring that up? I brought that up because I don't know why I brought it up. Let's talk about learning to die in the Anthropocene. Looking through the book, I bent a page. I didn't take notes. I didn't write in the margin. I didn't underline anything. I'd like to go back through and read it again. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll go back through, read it again, make notes, and I'll devote an entire episode, another episode, to talking about Scranton and learning to die in the Anthropocene. We'll do that. I did my first comedy show in a long time. I mentioned it in another episode that I would be doing a comedy show, that I was preparing for one. I can't remember what episode that was, but I remember talking about it. That show was canceled because of the wildfires, the smoke that was choking Portland there for a while. It was rescheduled, and it happened, I guess it would have been last Sunday, or no, yeah, Sunday before last, maybe Saturday, I'm not sure. It was really, really special. I enjoyed doing it very much. It was in a backyard here in Portland for about a dozen people, couples that were quarantining together. Very conscientious of COVID. I brought my own mic. There were wipes everywhere. Everybody was outdoors. There was a fan going. I felt good about it. And it was, unlike any comedy show I've ever done. Very relaxed, very conversational, very non-performative. I did do some material that I had pre-written, but a lot of it was very spontaneous, and the whole set it evolved into a conversation, questions and answer period, just talking in general about the world. The host of the event was pleased with the performance, so I was very happy with that. I felt like it was a good event for me because it was special. It was a special event because the host had just turned 50 and had just survived a terrible bout with cancer. He described to me his journey. I mean, it was incredible. He had this very rare form of cancer that was revealed right around March, right when the pandemic really hit and everything started going into lockdown. He was in hospice. I think he said he was in hospice twice between then and now. He had to be seen by a specialist in Los Angeles, USC. At one point he said he was in surgery for 9 days. I don't know how that works, but he said he was in a ketamine-induced coma. And the incredible thing was, here's this guy standing in front of me. He looks fine, just a healthy-looking guy. And yet he's been through all that. And, all of that during the pandemic, mind you. Absolutely incredible. And we talked after the performance, my performance, and he told me about this experience, and it was another moment for me to really kind of solidify and reflect on this new kind of peace that I've been feeling. I feel a little like a fever broke, and I actually talked with the host, this person I'm talking about. I talked to him about the Scranton book, Learning to Die in the Anthropocene. I recommended it to him. Because I think personal apocalypse and societal, ecological apocalypse, where does one end and the other begin, and where does one begin and the other end? I guess the idea of like, we're all going to die anyways, like whether or not the world comes to an end or it disintegrates or civilization crumbles, you're going to crumble at some point. There's another one of the only, what am I trying to say? Another person who's come to mind in these last couple weeks is YouTuber Claire. Oh God, I can't think of her last name. Claire. Claire, who let me look it up. I know the first time I've ever done that. Her name is Claire. Claire Wineland. Claire Wineland. Claire Wineland, the young woman who lived with cystic fibrosis her entire life, and she maintained a YouTube channel talking about life with CF. And she talked about living with a condition that was going to kill her entire life, being so aware that that was coming soon, and that her life was dominated, well, I mean, that this was a fact of her life. And that she could, well, okay. So yeah, the constant pain of a body trying to kill you, trying to drown you at all times, knowing that you would die young, probably in your teens or 20s, knowing that you will be dealing with all sorts of medical issues that go along with this. Full catastrophe living from the beginning through your entire life. And yet, she shared so much with so many. It's really moving when you look at, especially, well, yeah, I'm not going to recommend one talk over another, but I mean, she's pretty well known. I mean, you might know who she is. TED Talks and things like that. It's not easy to see why people were taken with and amazed and moved by what she says. And she is a person who I think of as a perfect example of a difficult, short life was a life of great meaning and a tremendous contribution to many people. It was in no way less than a long life, and a comfortable one or an easy one. And that was kind of the thing I was struggling with a lot. In the last episode, I was talking about, why should people have kids? They're just going to suffer in the future with this climate change and all the craziness that'll go along with it that we're already starting to see. And then at the end of the episode, I kind of, I keep saying kind of. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to wrangle in my incidental words. Trying to be aware of what I'm saying. Take breaks. Don't have to fill all the space. I was thinking about mindfulness when I was doing the comedy show. I was thinking about mindfulness. I officiated a wedding of two of my friends. I don't know if I mentioned that in previous episodes, but that was another event of note between the last episode and this one. Officiated a wedding, same thing. I remember as I was speaking, I was very aware of what my hands were doing, how I was standing, who I was looking at. where my eyes were going. I was aware of all these things as I was speaking, and it was a very good feeling. It was one that I have been out of touch with for quite a while, having not performed comedy much in quite some time. The physical act of being in front of people, performing, and being in the body and in the mind. It was a good feeling, an empowering feeling. One that I was reminded of is one that is valuable to me. I had little time to prepare for the wedding. I got the notes from the bride and groom only, several days before the wedding. And I planned to set my mind to it. And right when that was happening, there was a big fascist, Proud Boy event that was supposed to take place in Portland. I had a lot of anxiety around that. What's going to happen? What's it going to be like? But I was distracted from that event because that morning our dog, we have a small dog, a 7-pound dog, central to our lives, very beloved. He was attacked by another dog and injured, gravely injured. So from that moment on, my partner, my girlfriend, her life and mine were devoted to this dog and his care for the next 2 weeks, essentially. It was, a very, very big, consuming thing. And right after that happened, the wedding was on a Monday, actually. And the attack happened on a Saturday, so I was right in the heat of the whole thing. Didn't really have much time to focus on it and prepare. I tried to, but it didn't derail me. I felt like, okay, let's do the best we can and then speak from the heart. Kept it brief. Used a tiny bit of notes. Nothing wrong with that. And all these events have fed into this equanimity that I'm feeling now. Seeing a wedding, life goes on. Life goes forward. Unions are made. Reminds me that I have some skills in public speaking. That's empowering. Seeing us deal with this dog situation, going from a situation where he very easily could have been killed. That didn't happen. We took care of him very well. He's recovered completely. He's almost totally healed. And it's only been, a little over 2 weeks since this happened. It's incredible. Feels so good. And it's just an example of, a thing coming at you. You deal with it. Some words that resonated in my mind recently. I was talking with my brother. He called to check in about the dog. He lives in London, England, my brother. He saw my mom, I think, had told him that the dog had been attacked. He called me. That was very nice. And one of the things he said in the course of our conversation, he goes, life is just like that. It's like just one thing after another you have to deal with. And that's not like a bad thing necessarily. I mean, it can be at times, but that just the fact of like things coming at you that you have to deal with, that's life. And I guess in closing, that's kind of the takeaway of this episode. or whatever you want to say. It's the theme or something that I want to like hammer home, is this idea that like no matter what happens in November with the election and the lead up to it and the time after it, no matter what chaos is unleashed in the streets, in the culture, what kind of turmoil and injury and unfairness and horror, injustice, or victory, new leaves, new opportunities, new visions, whatever is stirred up, let loose, no one can know. But we can be assured that no matter what it is, we'll just have to deal with stuff coming at us. And we're probably more capable of doing so than we think. I think this first, post George Floyd till now, has been, most of my focus has been on, violence in the streets, what it is, and going to, out there and seeing it firsthand. And I've been thinking a lot about that stuff, but I feel like now I'm moving into this thing where I'm thinking a lot about mutual aid, that end of things. Like what do we need to do? We need to band together and create systems that work for us. Work around, if the government truly is broken and cannot function and will not serve you, and we just have to serve one another. We have to figure that out. And I think that's one of the strong points. Well, I don't think it, I know it. It's one of the strong points of whatever you want to call the left. The mutual aid stuff going on in Portland, the banding together. I mean, when these wildfires happened, it was these Antifa, quote unquote, mutual aid groups, leftist mutual aid groups that were doing all kinds of work. I didn't see anything like that on the militia end of things, I think, and then you've seen these like this whole plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. These guys like met on Facebook. They couldn't keep it together. They were outed. It's deep connection in the sense that they're willing to do crazy violence and end up in jail the rest of their lives, all that. But like these people's connections they're like, I read some article where they were saying like, oh, you got to bring your ID so that they wanted to check, make sure the people they were meeting with from Facebook were they're actually who they said they were. Excuse me. And I was thinking like it's deep, it's shallow. These connections, there might be a lot of them that the internet can do, but a lot of the connections are very shallow. And I think, people who actually work together, live in the same place, form unions based on shared values, it's a very powerful and effective force, especially when the people doing so are competent, motivated, intelligent, and have a real passion for what they're doing. So that's where I've come out after this. This is, like I said, this episode is kind of the answer to last episode. And that's where we ended up. It's mutual aid, it's fundraising, it's creating something beautiful and hopeful, making a future through action now. And in doing so, making the present bearable.